أهلا بكم في قناة الأحياء للصف الثالث ثانوي. Today's lecture will continue our talk about reproduction in plants, so let's begin. We discussed the asexual reproduction in the last lecture. Today we're going to start with the sexual reproduction in plants. Then after we are done with plants, we will start talking about reproduction in human beings. Now, for plants, for sexual production from its name, of course, it needs two individuals. Each individual, a male and a female, each of them has their gametes. And each gamete, coming from a parent carrying the parents' characters and genetic information, and both of them, when they unite in sexual reproduction, they produce the zygote, and the zygote grows into an embryo. Okay. Since two individuals are needed, two parents, the young receives from both parents even a minute part of their nuclear substance. Conversely, we studied in the last lecture that the young in the asexual reproduction receives nuclear substance from only one parent. So it's a copycat from that individual. So it's completely different than sexual reproduction. Okay, sexual reproduction needs more time and energy consuming than asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction occurs at a certain age, so there must be some elapse of time till the individual prepares for this sexual reproduction. The parents prepare a suitable environment for the new offsprings coming. They keep guarding the eggs, for example, and protection of the youngs till they grow larger. The other form, some forms even face more hardships in order to protect their young and keep their embryos within their bodies till birth. Okay. We said that asexual reproduction depends on mitotic division. Sexual reproduction depends on meiotic division. Okay, this is the main division in sexual reproduction when forming gametes. Of course, the parents are 2N. They have the original number of chromosomes. Okay, and each of them produce gametes with haploid cells, 1N, a single N. So it contains half the amount of genetic information from the parent. And by these haploid cells, when they unite together in sexual production, they produce a 2N individual. Okay? So this is the main difference than the asexual reproduction. Now, types of sexual reproduction, we have two main methods. First method is conjugation, in which it occurs in primitive organisms like protozoa, algae, and fungi. It occurs by mitosis at suitable conditions. But they turn to sexual reproduction by conjugation if subjected to drought, hardships, if the environment became unsuitable for them, so they turn into sexual reproduction. Now we will study the example in Spirogyra. The Spirogyra, common in green stagnant waters, and it's in the form of filaments, and each filament is formed of one row of cells. The cells, by the way, are haploid cells. So the organism is formed of filaments, and the filament is formed of one row of cells. The cells are haploid in number, okay, and they turn to conjugation during unsuitable conditions, and there are two types that occur for conjugation. The first type of conjugation is scalariform conjugation, where the conjugation occurs between two filaments. Okay, when two filaments contact each other, there is a protrusion that occurs in the surfaces, adjacent to each other, forming a conjugation tube. Now, the cells in one filament, their cytoplasm, their protoplasm start to roll over and pass through that conjugation tube, as you can describe it, and rolls up into a sphere and moves across the tube to the opposite cell filament, forming a zygote. This is the zygote here in this example. See how the protoplasm here is rolled up into a sphere and passed through the tube, the conjugation tube between one filament and the other. Now the zygote is formed. The zygote, the wall of the zygote becomes thick, so that's why it turns into a spore called a zygospore. Now, since the conjugation occurred between two haploid cells or haploid filaments, so the zygote will be diploid, 2N. Okay? Now, how to produce gametes out of this zygospore? It turns into meiotic division. Meiotic division. Okay. It starts to divide when the surrounding conditions improved, and divides by meiosis to form 4 haploid cells. As you can see here, 3 of them degenerate and 1 remains, and divides by mitosis to form a new filament. So again, the scalariform conjugation occurs between 2 filaments. Because we will study other type of conjugation that will occur in one filament, in the same filament. No, these are 2 filaments. Each filament formed of cells of haploid number, and a protrusion occurs between the filaments. It gets connected, forming a tube. And the protoplasm of one filament rolls up into a sphere, passes through the tube, and forms a zygote with the other filament. Of course, since the 2 tubes were haploid numbers, the zygote will be diploid number 2N. And then what happens to the zygote? The wall gets thickened and turns into a zygospore. And by means of meiotic division, it forms 4 haploid cells. Remember that. 3 of them degenerate and 1 remains to germinate into a new filament. It's an easy form of reproduction. Now there's the other type of conjugation, which is the lateral conjugation. Lateral conjugation occurs into the same filament. So the cells in the same filament, openings occur between them, and the protoplasm passes from one cell to the adjacent cell through an opening, and a zygote is formed. Okay? The zygote then divides by meiosis before germination of the new filament, leading to haploidy of the algae cells. So the major difference between the 2 types of conjugation is that the difference between the scalariform conjugation occurs between 2 filaments, while the lateral conjugation occurs, it's the same principle, but occurs within the same filament. Don't forget that. The other type of reproduction, sexual reproduction, is reproduction by sexual gametes. Okay, this occurs in higher animals and plants. They produce by means of gametes that are differentiated into two kinds, male and female gametes, as it's well known. Both are derived from meiosis that takes place in the gonads. So it occurs between gametes of male and female partners. Okay, the male gametes, they are the movable ones. They will go to fertilize the female gametes. So they need to be in motion, in locomotion. Thus, they are adapted for that purpose. They lose most of their cytoplasm. The body becomes pointed to be able to fertilize the female gamete, and it gets, it's provided with a locomotor tail to be able, or a flagellum, to be able to move, to help transport of the genetic material to the female gamete. Okay. Some of these gametes will be subjected to loss. That's why 4 male gametes are produced from each original cell, to make sure that at least one gamete, fertilizes the gamete of the female. Now, the female gametes, they remain stationary within the female body till fertilization. So they are spherical and enriched with food, and they are produced in few numbers. Male gametes may be transported to the female through water. In aquatic animals, for example, the male produces his gametes and female into the water, and then fertilization occurs in the water, so it's called external fertilization, and the embryo develops in the water. But in terrestrial animals, fertilization takes place internally within the female. Sperms, they get to the eggs that remain within the female body, and fusion occurs between the two gametes and form the diploid zygote, the 2N zygote, and passes towards embryonic development by means of mitosis. Okay, so this is reproduction by sexual gametes. Now, there is a phenomenon called alternation of generations. Alternation of generations means alternation of sexual and asexual behaviors within the same life cycle. Within the same life cycle, there is alternation of sexual and asexual behavior. Now, we said that asexual behavior ensures rapid production of large numbers, while the sexual behavior ensures the genetic diversity. So by passing through both forms of reproduction, sexual and asexual reproduction, both rapid production and genetic diversity happen in this form, in this life cycle. Now, we can demonstrate this life cycle in the life cycle of Plasmodium, the malaria parasite. And don't confuse this with the mosquito itself. The malaria parasite actually infects the mosquito. So an infected mosquito, and we will know how it will get infected. Infected mosquito with the malaria parasite bites the human skin. It pours in the blood of the victim minute spindle-shaped sporocytes. See, spindle-shaped sporocytes. These sporozoites move towards the liver and remain stagnant there, spend an incubation period during which they make 2 cycles of asexual reproduction in the liver. Okay, their nuclei divide asexually and giving several merozytes. The merozytes migrate in the blood, infecting the red blood cells. They go inside the red blood cells and they pass through several cycles of divisions. That's why the red blood cells will rupture. This process takes 2 days. By the time the RBC, the infected RBC or red blood cell, is infected and ruptures because of the division of the parasite inside it, the time of rupture occurs after 2 days, as we mentioned, and at that time the symptoms of malaria start to appear. What are the symptoms of malaria? Because of the toxic substances released, there's fever on the patient, heat, chill, رعشة في رعشة وفي عرق كتير and sweating. So the symptoms of malaria بيبقى فيه fever, بيبقى فيه حمى, بيبقى فيه رعشة, بيبقى فيه عرق كتير. Heat, chill, and sweating. Don't forget that at symptoms of malaria. Now, this part and this part are asexual reproduction. Okay, this part of the cycle and this part of the cycle are asexual reproduction. Now, what happens then? Later, the gametocytes migrate, coming out of the ruptured RBCs, migrate to the mosquito with the patient bloods, where they develop 2 gametes in mosquito's stomach. Now, at the same time, the mosquito is introducing the sporozoites. Maybe another non-infected mosquito comes in and starts to suck the patient's blood. Then these gametocytes pass to the mosquito and becomes infected. These, when pass to the mosquito, they go to the stomach, they fuse into a zygote that transforms to ookinete or ookinete. The ookinete or ookinete, which penetrates into the stomach wall, divides meiotically to give the oocyte or oocyst. Now, this is meiotic division. This is sexual reproduction, because the gametes join together and divides by meiotic division. Okay? Its nucleus divides in the stomach by mitosis, and this process produces numerous sporozoites that liberate and move towards the mosquito's salivary glands to start the cycle again. So if we divided the cycle into 4 parts, this part and this part, this part and this part, what happens after the ookinete goes to the stomach? Now, this part is the sexual form, and all the other parts are asexual, so it's 3-to-1. This is called alternation of generations. Okay, this is an example of alternation of generation. Okay, another example is the fern plant. It's called polypodium and is known in plant nurseries. The life cycle of polypodium plants starts with a sporophyte, a sporophyte. It has a spore. These contain numerous spore mother cells diploid in number, which divide by meiosis and giving the spores, which are haploid in number. So the sporophyte divides by meiosis to give the haploid number offspring. On maturation of these, spores are released and carried by wind to far distances. Upon settling on a wet soil, and I mean by wet soil, soil with a layer of water on top of it, not mud. No, it's soil, muddy soil, yes, with a layer of water on top of it, because this layer of water on top of the soil is essential later for the process of reproduction. Now, the spore germinates, forming several cells that develop to a heart-shaped body called the gametophyte. Heart-shaped body called the gametophyte, and grows over the soil. From the lower surface of this gametophyte, there are processes called rhizoid processes. These rhizoid processes penetrate into the soil to absorb water and salts. And now from the anterior region of the same surface of the gametophyte grow the genital organs, namely antheridia, that is the male organ, and archegonia, that is the female organ. This is an archegonium and this is an antheridia. Okay, this is the male part and this is the female part. Now the antheridia, when they mature, the male gametes, I mean, they are ciliated sperms, so be able to, for locomotion, swim over the soil water. I told you it's important to have a layer of soil water, and swims in it to reach the mature archegonia for fertilizing its egg, forming the diploid zygote. The diploid zygote, as you can see here. See, this is the diploid zygote. Now, this diploid zygote divides and differentiates to a new sporophyte that grows over the gametophyte, on which it depends for some time till developing its own roots, stem, and leaves. Now, the gametophyte then degenerates, okay, while the sporophyte grows to repeat the life cycle. So, the 2N sporophyte that reproduces asexually alternates with the gametophyte haploidy that reproduces sexually in the life cycle of ferns. By this way, represents a typical example of the phenomenon of alternation of generations. Okay, so we've studied 2 examples on the alternation of generations. I hope you got the maximum benefit from this lecture, and thank you very much for watching.